Welcome, crafties, as we jump to chapter 27 of Letters from Christopher by Sherilyn Cadle. I'm Jennifer. If you're new to the channel, I cover crafting and crime. For example, I do laser engraving. Made that for my little podcast here. And I'm wearing my little crown today that my daughter put on my head. I was playing spa with her. And as we were playing spa, I thought to myself, Chris Watts will never hang out with his kids and get to play pretend. And it is so fun sometimes to just play pretend with your kids. So pretending to be a princess in a spa, you will never get to do that again, Chris. If you're new here, I do not read the book word for word. You are going to get the best of the book, in my opinion. And I'll play clips for you. I don't use video I don't have permission to use, just as a disclaimer. And if you're a content creator, you should not do that either, because you could get sued. Jumping into 27, if you are into paranormal, this is the chapter for you. You're going to dig this. This was one of the spookiest chapters, in my opinion. But if you are wondering, was Chris possessed? He's going to address it for you. So, grab your popcorn. Maybe turn the lights on, because you don't want to be too scared, right? Chapter 27. Chris keeps asking himself over and over, why did this happen to me? And he says on August 15th, he came face to face with something evil in the jail. And it appeared as his maternal grandparents. Now, with that said, I did try to do some research to find out who they are, what they're all about. What we do know from this book with Sherilyn, and I will put a link to it, is that Chris had a great relationship with his grandmother, but his mother, however, did not have a good relationship with her. My point in digging around was to try to find out if these people did something bad, did something dark. Served time in prison for killing someone, something along those lines. I did not find anything along those lines. So I'm very curious, and I want your thoughts in the comments section, because some of you may not have heard this part of Chris's confession before about these two spirits showing up, and they're his maternal grandparents. And just a side note, when Chris originally was in North Carolina and wanted his kids to see their Meemaw, he was talking about his dad's mom. So this is not the same grandparents he's referring to. Just to clarify, the grandma that had dementia was his dad's mom. Chris says that this is going to be his last and true confession. This book he does with Sherilyn Cadle. However, we know that's not true because he did a book with Dylan Tallman later, years later. So, let's listen to some of that audio where he talks about the evil spirit.
Had me on speakerphone the other day and she could hear my voice. I hope you are doing well, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. God bless. Chris. I would say I'd rather be cold than hot, especially in this little shoebox I'm in. Okay, let me start right into the Weld County Jail experience. I arrive at the Weld County Jail the night of August 15th. I get booked, fingerprinted, and my picture taken, and then escorted by a deputy and two technical officers to the unit I'm staying in. One of the officers, as he's slamming my door shut, says, "Good luck." I'm standing there alone in the darkness. The only light was that of a dim nightlight used for guards to check on you. I'm standing there wondering, is this my normal for the rest of my life? I lay down in the bunk in my turtle suit, as I'm in their suicide watch pod, and just stare off into the darkness. Nothing is adding up, and it feels like none of this can be real. To my astonishment, I look in the front corner of my cell and see two dark figures standing there. I thought, okay, this is my eyes playing tricks on me. So I closed them and opened my eyes again, and yet, they are still there. As I focus more intently, I can see one is male and one is female. The male is in a black suit and the female is in a black dress with a Victorian-style hat. Both their wardrobes looked vintage. Their faces were ash-colored and almost familiar, until the familiar feeling turned into a sure thing. This was my grandfather and grandmother on my mom's side, their faces being unmistakable now. I almost went to move closer to them when their eyes opened in unison. They motioned me toward them, but I was frozen, and I knew I didn't want to go toward them. Their eyes were as red as blood, crimson. This eerie feeling came over me as I had four eyes staring back at me, as if piercing my soul in a bad way. The only problem was, I felt like I was in a trance and had to keep eye contact. Somehow, they would not let my eyes move off of them. I felt like I needed to go over to them, as the one motioned his hand for me to come near. But all of a sudden, something broke the trance. I looked away and looked back, and the corner of my cell was empty. The pair was gone.
Okay, so you're gonna have to share your thoughts on that. Why did these dark spirits appear as the maternal grandparents? Why not a stranger? Why them? I keep questioning that. Why not, I don't know, Nicole Kessinger? Because he thinks that eventually he tells Dylan Tolman he feels that she was doing something bad. So why were they the ones that appeared to him? Then he kind of bounces around in this chapter and says that he wrote a letter to the Rzuceks. He published in this book with Sherilyn Cadle the letter, but he did not send it to the Rzuceks. We do not know if they've actually heard this. I'm sure they have. I'm sure someone sent it to them, or out of curiosity, maybe they were able to stumble upon it. But let's hear what he said to them.
These letters from Christopher Watts contain the things that Christopher did not share with the FBI, or even his family. This is the platform in which Christopher was the most comfortable to tell all, the only way he would tell all. Included here is also his testimony that was promised to be told for him, in his exact words. I would tell it on his behalf, but I wanted to tell it with his words exactly. His testimony is riveting, and he tells it to you, the readers. The letters may contain grammar errors and typos, but I have given you the content word for word from Christopher. There are a couple of letters that he sent me, something to insert into the letters he had already written. Dear Frank, Sandy, and Frankie, I'm sorry for the pain and utter anguish that I've caused your family. This is a travesty that I never thought could or would occur. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico are four beautiful souls that will live on forever in heaven and in our hearts. I know you must hate me for what I've done, and honestly, I would be surprised if you didn't. This is a moment in my life that I will never be able to undo, and it rips me apart every single day. I see their beautiful faces, their beautiful smiles everywhere I look. When I read to them at night, I can feel them snuggled up next to me, like we were at home. I want you to know that I still consider you my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my brother-in-law, and that I love you all, yesterday, today, and forever. I pray that one day you can have forgiveness for me, but most of all, I pray you can have compassion on my family.
Interesting. I mean, how do you even start a letter to them like that? I mean, if I were him, I wouldn't even go there. There's no words you can say to justify what you did. And you don't deserve the forgiveness, so don't ask for it. Then Sherilyn writes Christopher another letter in which she responds to him and says, have you ever had a psychological exam? And does he think he might be on the autism spectrum? I'm going to play a clip for you. But that question really bothered me. I have a child on the spectrum. And I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know how to explain it. I think she thought because Chris had a hard time with his emotions, or had, I guess, a lack of empathy with what he did, he might be on the spectrum. I don't know. I just took it the wrong way. Let's just say that. But here is a clip from that part.
If I were to see a doctor during my case, then anything I said could have been subpoenaed by the court or DA. And the Asperger's symptoms do make a lot of sense. And I can match up a bunch of instances in my life that corresponded with it too. It would have been much easier to diagnose me with it when I was 11 years old, instead of 33 years old. Next time I talk to the psychological department, I will ask what it takes to get an evaluation. The media is horrible with what they put out there sometimes. Is my diet really that exciting? The sale of my house was pushed back to July before the investigators came to see me. I have a civil case against me, wrongful death lawsuit. And in the matter of the probate court, the attorneys thought the house could be sold at a profit and the money would go to the wrongful death suit and help Shanann's family. After evaluating with the realtor, she told Shanann's parents that the house wouldn't sell for more than what was owed. So then Chase Bank pushed the auction to July 17th. It had nothing to do with the investors. Just another example of the truth versus media truths.
So first we're going to address the autism thing, and then we're going to address the house sale. First off, Sherilyn Cato calls it Asperger's syndrome, which is not a term used anymore. If you didn't know that, now you know. It's just called the autism spectrum because it's a broad spectrum. Using the word or term Asperger's is almost saying, like, yes, I have autism, but I'm high functioning. Like, I have a higher IQ, so I'm not dumb, but I have autism. So it's kind of like comparing yourself to someone else on the spectrum. Maybe that's why I got offended by it. We do know he did have an IQ test and he scored 140. We don't know. Maybe he did follow up and get a psychological evaluation, which is, I wonder why didn't you get one? If you claimed, remember earlier in the chapter, he claimed he was always going to plead guilty. Well, if you were going to just plead guilty and admit that Shanann had nothing to do with it and we're not going to go to trial, why not go get a psychological evaluation? That part didn't make sense to me. Also, with the sale of the house, we know that house sold shortly after for $40,000 under asking price to the Miller family. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I really feel bad for these people. Part of me feels like, why would you buy a house where that happened? You're going to get looky-loos coming by. You're going to get busybodies all up in your business. And then they went on Facebook and they were posting, we live here. People were saying you're trying to be like Shanann because they did some type of vision board event that Shanann used to do those. So like they got caught up in the whole mix of this drama. And it makes you wonder, like, did you do that on purpose? Or did you just get a really great deal on the house? I don't know. What I do know is I'm not going to put a request in for the video, but you can go search it. Someone else has the video up, where a domestic dispute happened between the Millers at the home, and the father was charged, I believe, with child endangerment or child cruelty because him and his wife got in an argument. He slapped a glass of wine out of her hand, and because the children were present, when the incident happened, that's why he was getting those charges. They have filed for divorce and they are going their separate ways. And that house sold again. So we're talking about another sale of the house. And I believe it was around $600,000 that house sold for. They were asking for 7, so it went below asking. A lot of people have debated that house should just be torn down and they should put a park in the subdivision, like a memorial park or a playground. I don't know why they don't. I don't know why the whole community doesn't come together and just say, like, hey, make that piece of land a loss and put a park there, put a green space, do something better with it, do something positive with it. But anyway, that house sold again in October of 2024. I know nothing about the new owners. I haven't seen anything about it. I kind of hope that it's people without children so that people stay out of their business. I hope they don't do anything to try to bring attention to themselves. I do know that when people were trying to go see the house when it was listed, you had to actually prove you had the money in the bank to buy that house because they wanted to make sure you weren't there just to get in the house of where something happened. And sadly, people do stuff like that. Normal folks are going to love this. This is the part in the book where Chris says he calls it Forgiveness Night. And he calls it Forgiveness Night because he claims this is the day that the evil spirit left his body. This may be the first time you're hearing about this. So, what that means is that Chris thinks he was possessed by an evil spirit, and now he thinks he is free of it. So, let that sink in to you.
Okay, enough of Nikki relationship. Let's get to Forgiveness Night, October 1st, 2018. I know that was the night because the Kansas City Chiefs were playing Sunday Night Football on that night. I remember watching that game that night. It's weird what our minds can remember about certain nights and give us some clues. The pod I'm in is called RS, and attached to the cell there's a room with a table, TV, and phone. I've only been in this cell for 2 days, so this is all very new to me. I'm sitting at the table reading a book when the news comes on around 9:30 p.m. Then I hear my name. I look up to see myself sitting in a courtroom in an orange jumpsuit. Never thinking in my entire
Okay, guys, I don't know. Feels very weird, and I'm not just doing this to be funny or like make it seem paranormal, but I swear I had that whole audio clip ready to go, and it kind of cuts off right where we want to talk about it. So I will just recap what happens is he said he was watching TV, and then he got really emotional and started hysterically crying and saying, God, please lift this burden off of my shoulders. And then he said that he felt a hand on his head, and he knew it was God there. And I do believe he said that the maternal grandparents reappeared again with the bloodshot eyes and was scary for him, but when he felt the hand on his head, they went away. So, or I believe maybe he said just the grandmother showed up. But anyway, it's weird my clip is missing. I am going to dig around for it and look for it because I feel like that's weird. That was like one of the best, I feel like, parts of this book because Christopher never does a real interview where he says the truth about like, hey, I think I was possessed, but now I'm good. So anyway, moving on. Christopher says he began reading the Bible a lot after that experience. And it took him 2 weeks to finish it. He says he then moved into the RS pod. I don't really know what the RS pod is. And then he had his sentencing hearing. He said after the sentencing hearing, he's moved to a pod called Close Watch. And he had to stay there. And it's just him and one other deputy. And they would often talk about the Bible while Chris was in there. And he says that he had a really hard day, obviously, the day he was sentenced. And he came back and he was hysterically crying. And he says that the deputy came over to him and said, "Can I pray with you?" So we're going to listen to what he says about that.
November 19th. I was very emotional, as you can imagine. The deputy could tell I was having a hard time holding it together and asked if he could pray with me. I was shocked by this, but was completely honored at the same time. Picture it. A deputy in his uniform and an inmate in his oranges. Two entities that are usually at enmity with one another, praying through a cell door. Remarkable. After he was done praying, I took over and read Psalm 33, verses 13 through 22, which I wanted to read during my sentencing hearing, but I thought it better I didn't, and said a little prayer for my wife and kids and everyone affected by this tragedy. I was in tears. He was in tears. It was a very moving moment. In the end, I can look back at every pod I was housed in and relate it to a stage in my life.
Statement, because I think that would have just pissed off the Rzuceks, and it's best he didn't. So I'm glad he didn't. But I did read that scripture and I was like, I really don't think this would be the one I would pick to read about this whole situation. It was just not, I don't know, not very touching. It didn't speak to me as something I would use to explain the situation of what's going on and how I feel. Also, Nicole Kessinger comes up again. Christopher talks about how the relationship took a serious twist when Nicole gave him the key to her house. That was the day he decided, okay, I'm all in. He says this is the day he realized he couldn't have Nikki and his family at the same time. The night at the Lazy Dog, they talked about their future together. That Chris could get an apartment big enough for him and the girls. And then they'll move at a slower pace. So when we talk about that slower pace, it always makes me think about if Nikki said that, which she did in a police interview, then you can't tell me you didn't know the guy was married. You knew he was married. Because you were taking advantage of all of the time that Shanann was in North Carolina and letting Chris stay the night at your house because you knew once she got back from town, from North Carolina, you wouldn't see him as much. So there she is caught in a lie. You notice in the interview with detectives, she tries to kind of play it off like Chris is just like a side piece. He doesn't mean anything to me. But then we all find the letters and text messages that say, I love you. So clearly it was a little more serious than you're letting on. Chris said if he could tell he said Nicole was starting to make plans for their future and he doesn't know why. So my thoughts on this about that meeting at the Lazy Dog and them talking about their future, I would say that they were talking about marriage, which would make sense for Nicole to be Googling wedding dresses, right? Like, if they're sitting down at dinner talking about, like, maybe we'll get married one day, then that makes sense why she was searching wedding dresses. They were talking about getting married. I'm not going to give Chris the time of day to spit us some BS that he is a God-fearing man now. So all of the part of the book where he talks about being forgiven and his testament, we're not going there. I'm not giving him the time of day. If you're interested in hearing about it, the link will be in the bio. You need to support Sherilyn and get her book. The other thing Chris says is that he wishes he could apologize to Nicole Atkinson. And he understands now that she was just being a concerned friend. And that part kind of stood out to me because it's like, Chris, she didn't care whether you were mad at her or not. She was doing what she was going to do and didn't care how you felt about it. But this is what he said.
And thank you for being a faithful friend to Shanann. I hope you find peace and contentment in your life going forward. I never knew anything about the Child Protective Services claims. This report about Shanann only being allowed around the kids 90 minutes a day was something that was never made aware to me. If it were true, I would think I would have been notified. I will admit I was in the dark when it came to a lot of issues, but I just can't see that being veiled from my vision. I guess there is a CPS claim out there from what my parents tell me. This claim is not true. And a court date, but I was not in the loop on this if there is any validity. When I worked on the weekends, Shanann was with the kids by herself. She took the kids to school early during the week because she liked to keep a schedule and get the day going early. She used the time alone to work the Thrive business, and I would go pick up the girls when I got home from work. There are so many things that don't make sense, that people are grasping at that have no present tense in my eyes, but I have been very shielded from the legit.
Now, from what I've read, the reason there's a CPS claim is because of what Chris did to the kids. That's why there is a claim on record involving Child Protective Services. Not that there was something that happened before, but I don't know. I didn't do a request for records on anything like that. The part about him asking for forgiveness from Nicole Atkinson, I highly doubt that she would forgive you, Chris. I mean, if she did, that woman is a saint because she's been through hell. Like I said, she is a fellow breast cancer survivor. I am not aware if she had the cancer before this happened or after. I do remember her hair being a little shorter like mine in the video. So I don't know if she had just finished treatment, which is brutal in itself, and then have to go through the trauma of what happened to her friend, or if the cancer happened after. But if it did happen after, I'm not surprised because stress can really take a toll on your body. And if something bad is going to come out of your system, your nervous system, like it's going to happen when you're stressed out. So, with that said, I believe that is all I have on this book, you guys. He does say that his family continues to say they love him. We know that. He wrote some letters in the book to his family. I'm not going to cover that. He says he feels like his entire life with Shanann was choreographed. And that he wants people to know, even though he doesn't feel Shanann was his soulmate, he still loved her. So, share your thoughts with me on that. That ends our series on this book. I am working backwards, so some of you are seeing these videos and saying, wait a minute, I missed the other chapters. I wanted to kind of do these videos from the end backwards because I wanted to have fresh memory. But I've realized it's taking me a lot more time to edit and put these together. So I will continue to put these into chunks and review the book. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. And be well.